It's 10:18 a.m., the 5th of October 2025. South China Sea, 42 nautical miles southwest of Fiery Cross Reef. The U.S. carrier group centered on USS Gerald R. Ford jolts as multiple fire control radars lock on. Alarms echo through steel decks. Red lights flash. Sailors rush to battle stations. On USS Higgins, the helm turns hard to port too late. The Chinese destroyer CNS Lhasa cuts across its bow at less than 200 meters. CIC shouts. Spy-6 shows simulated launches from the reef. SM-6 tubes arm up. Across the water, HQ-9B arrays track back. The open channel crackles. You are entering Chinese waters. We operate in international seas. Overhead, 2F divided by A-18E roar into the sky, while an EA-18G activates jammers. A Triton UAV arcs south, feeding live radar data. The captain's voice is steady. Hold fire. Track and shadow. Spray hits the deck as Ford turns broadside. Every eye fixed on red icons glowing on screen. One wrong call and the Spratlys ignite. The South China Sea is one of the busiest trade routes on Earth. Over a third of global shipping moves through these waters. Every crate, every tanker means fuel, food, or medicine for someone back home. That's why the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Group is here. To keep lanes open, to prove the sea stays free. But for China, it's about control and pride. To Beijing, these reefs are its blue homeland. To Washington, they're international waters where no flag rules the waves. At 9.3 degrees north, 111.6 degrees east, the two powers stare each other down. The Ford Spy-6 radar scans the horizon, while the Chinese Type 055 cruiser Dalian drifts closer, sensors humming. Dozens of Echoes flicker training drones, or something more. Each move is a test, each silence a signal. Insurance rates spike when cargo ships divert. A week's delay can ripple into empty shelves back home. Inside Ford's Combat Center, the air is thick. Officers whisper updates. One screen shows a simulated launch from Fiery Cross Reef. Another displays Chinese fighters circling higher. J-15 patrol the edge. A BZK-005 drone noses in, sniffing emissions. Aegis baseline 10 swords clutter from threats. Tagging decoys in real time, it's the brain keeping chaos in check. The goal for both sides isn't combat, it's dominance without firing a shot. Every radar lock, every warning broadcast pushes the line between deterrence and disaster thinner. For 20 tense minutes, the sea itself feels like a trigger waiting to be pulled. The Ford's crew knows one wrong call could cost hundreds of lives and ignite a war no one wants. If you were on that bridge staring down those warships, would you hold fire or strike first? Tell us below. Press 1 for restraint or 9 for strike. 10:21 a.m. 3 minutes since first contact. The Ford's radar picture fills with fast-moving blips. CIC confirms. Mock launch signatures from Fiery Cross Reef simulated, but dangerously close to the real thing. The destroyer USS Higgins calls, requesting permission to light defensive radar. The captain nods once. Do it. A pulse of energy ripples from the ship's SPY-6 array. Across the water, Chinese radars answer instantly, locking tighter. On screens, red and blue tracks twist in a digital dogfight long before any missile flies. Each ping is a message. We see you. The Ford's flight deck erupts with motion. 2F divided by A-18E, Super Hornets roar down the catapults, followed by an EA-18G Growler trailing a faint electric haze. Angels climbing, offset east, the air boss calls. The jets fan out low over the sea, their sensors scanning for heat trails. They're armed only with training loads, but their presence alone shifts the balance. At 9.3 degrees north, the Chinese cruiser Lhasa pivots, exposing its broadside arrays. A moment later, Dalian transmits a coded burst electronic interference blankets the band. A Triton UAV overhead captures it all, relaying data in real time to Pearl Harbor. Within seconds, analysts 5,000 miles away see the same radar spikes as the crew on deck. Multiple locks detected, the weapons officer reports. Recommend counter-illumination. The captain's reply is calm but final. Activate SM-6 system, no launch authorization. Cylinders along Higgins' deck hum as targeting software kicks in. Across the line, Chinese HQ-9B batteries on the reef ship their dishes in response. The radio chatter is now a storm English, Mandarin, call signs, and warnings overlap into static, unidentified aircraft. This is the People's Liberation Navy. Leave immediately. The U.S. commander answers through clenched teeth. International waters, lawful operation. For a heartbeat, the sea freezes. Both sides' radars blink from track to engage. A single spark now could light the fuse. Then, silence only waves slapping hulls. The Ford holds position, her escorts forming a defensive ring. Every eye on board knows what this moment means. One slip, one misread signal, and peace burns away in seconds. 10:27 a.m. The sea is deceptively calm, but every ship's sensors are alive and twitching. The Ford's combat systems hum at full readiness. No one speaks above a whisper. Even the air smells of ozone and metal. Then new pings. Dozens of small, fast-moving returns bloom on radar, rushing in from the southwest. Low-level drones, the sensor officer says. Too small for missiles. The captain frowns. They're testing the line. The first wave of Chinese UAV skims the surface, weaving between radar shadows. Higgins launches chaff bursts, thin strips of aluminum scatter in the wind, confusing targeting systems. On Lhasa, jammers scream back, distorting the horizon with false ghosts. For every trick, there's an answer. This is a duel of nerves. Two Super Hornets dive low, their electronic pods lighting up. They lock onto the nearest UAV and trigger simulated strikes, digital kills recorded for analysis later. But the Chinese BZK-005 drones keep coming, relaying real-time images to command posts miles away. Neither side fires a real shot, yet both feel the weight of combat pressing on their chests. Inside the Ford's CIC, tension crackles. Operators monitor hundreds of tracks. One slip could launch $1 billion missile at a decoy worth a few thousand. A young sailor mutters, "Sir, how long can we hold this?" The answer, as long as it takes. Then a sharp tone pierces the control room, another radar lock. Closer, sharper. Chinese fighters, J-15, drop altitude to shadow the U.S. jets. Their heat signatures pulse red across the screens. Aegis algorithms flash warnings. Weapons free? One officer whispers. The captain shakes his head. Negative, maintain discipline. On the open channel, a calm but firm voice cuts through static. Foreign aircraft, you are endangering peace in the region. The reply comes tight and controlled. Peace is kept by those who stand their ground. The crew can feel it, the line thinning, the patience fading. Each pilot, each radar operator knows how easy it would be to cross it. If you were in that sky, staring down an enemy jet closing in at full speed, would you stay your hand or pull the trigger? Tell us below. Press 1 for control, or 9 for fire. 10:33 a.m. Just as the standoff seems to plateau, the unexpected happens. The Ford's radar picks up a new wave, larger, faster, flying dangerously low. Not drones, the sensor chief says. These are sea skimmers. The words hit like a shock. Sea skimming targets mean anti-ship missiles or something pretending to be. Alarms flare instantly. The Ford's defensive network shifts posture. Icons on the screen turn red. Identify source. The trace points northwest of Fiery Cross Reef from a Chinese-controlled installation. The command deck goes silent. If this launch is real, impact time is under 90 seconds. Countermeasures on standby, CIC yells. The destroyer Higgins deploys decoys. Ralph Johnson readies its SM-6 interceptors. On the Chinese side, Lhasa and Dalian swing broadside, their guns pivoting east. No one knows who moved first anymore. The growler above floods the area with electronic noise, masking signals. But the incoming contacts keep closing, either a glitch or a live fire test gone wrong. The captain's voice hardens. We're not waiting for confirmation. Bring up close, in defense. Gunners load rounds into the CIWS mounts. The mechanical whine echoes through the hull. Even a single burst at this range could start a war. The Ford's bridge crew hold their breath. A countdown begins. 30 seconds to visual contact. Then one blip vanishes. Another splits in two. The display ripples. The signals were reflections, false returns from atmospheric ducting. No missile, no launch. The danger was real only because both sides believed it. Relief spreads through the ship, but no one celebrates. The silence now feels heavier than the alarm ever did. 10:41 a.m. The relief doesn't last. A sudden surge of noise floods the Ford's radar, hundreds of echoes, too many to classify. It's saturation, the combat officer says. They're jamming everything. Screens flicker between static and red icons. Somewhere beyond the haze, real targets could be moving. The captain's jaw tightens. Switch to optical tracking. Cameras along the hull zoom in, two Chinese destroyers closing in. Deck guns slightly elevated, barrels glinting in sunlight. Surface units changing course, CIC reports. Closing to 25 nautical miles. The distance shrinks fast. Ford's escorts shift formation, cutting across her wake to form a shield. Higgins and Ralph Johnson go to general quarters. Their SM-6 batteries armed but locked under command control. On deck, crews secure helicopters and shut down jets to reduce heat signatures. The air feels heavy, static clings to skin. This close, a petty officer mutters, and nobody's shooting? Then it happens. A low rumble from the east, an explosion on the horizon. A plume rises near Lasse's position. Possible live fire, someone shouts. Within seconds, all ships go to battle mode. Ford's SPY-6 locks onto the plume, tagging it as an unknown splashdown. Was it a warning shot or a misfire? Confirm trajectory, the captain orders. Data floods the screen. The path matches no known missile type. A miscalibrated drone? A drop tank? Nobody can tell. The uncertainty itself is the most dangerous weapon. Sir, Chinese channels report routine training, comm says. The captain exhales. Routine right. His voice carries the weight of disbelief. Above, two Super Hornets return, banking low before landing. On the bridge, the captain stares through the glass, watching Lasse hold steady at the edge of sight. Damage control teams run quiet checks, as if bracing for a hit that never came. Log keepers note every second. Public Affairs drafts a statement no one wants to read. In the flag plot, a message is typed but not sent. Maintain posture. Avoid escalation. The Ford's crew watches as the Chinese ships turn north. Wakes trailing silver under the noon Sunday engines quiet. Hands unclench. Yet no one truly relaxes. Everyone knows how close the world came to crossing the line. Somewhere ashore, cameras on Fiery Cross keep rolling. Proof that today's calm lives on borrowed time. 11:05 a.m. The South China Sea drifts back into uneasy quiet. The Ford's radar clears no new locks, no hostile tracks. The captain finally orders stand down from general quarters. Some sailors lean against bulkheads, exhausted. Others stare at the horizon, still waiting for the sound that never comes. For 20 minutes, they stood on the edge of history, and somehow, it didn't tip. Across the region, news spreads fast. Satellite feeds show both fleets holding position, then slowly parting. Washington issues a protest, calling China's maneuvers reckless and unprofessional. Beijing fires back within the hour, accusing the U.S. of provocation under the guise of freedom of navigation. Neither side admits fault. Both claim victory. At sea, Ford's engineers log thousands of radar spikes, every false target, every electronic signature. Intelligence teams will study them for months, searching for patterns. But for the sailors on deck, data doesn't matter. What stays is the silence, the seconds when the ocean held its breath, waiting to see who would blink first. Allies take note. In Manila and Tokyo, defense staffs replay every maneuver. Insurance desks in Singapore twitch as shipping routes shift. Coast guards from Vietnam to Malaysia warn fishermen to steer wide of Fiery Cross. In war rooms and boardrooms, the same question lingers. If this is peace, what does war look like? Analysts call it a near miss. Diplomats call it restraint. But those aboard know the truth. It was luck, discipline, and fear in equal measure. The lesson is clear. Technology can jam signals, but it can't jam human tension. As Ford turns east toward open sea, her wake trails like a scar across blue water. Radios hum with normal chatter again. Calm returns, thin and temporary. If moments like this decide peace or war, where would you stand? Tell us below. Press 1 for diplomacy or 9 for deterrence. And if you want to see the next standoff unfold, stay with us when it happens. At exactly 6:47 local time, the 23rd of April, 2025, the guided missile destroyer USS William P. Lawrence slid into the northern mouth of the Taiwan Strait. Her automatic identification system flickered on a move that, in these waters, is like walking through a dark alley with your wallet hanging out. The strait is narrow, tense, and crawling with eyes that never blink. Somewhere on the Chinese mainland, less than an hour's flight away, someone was already watching. 53 miles inland, at a PLA Air Force base, a lone radar blip bloomed on a green screen. The operator's hand went straight to the phone. He didn't need to confirm it was Navy Day in China, and an American destroyer had just waltzed in without an invitation. The scramble horn shattered the morning calm. Two J-16 fighter pilots, halfway through their tea, froze for only a heartbeat before bolting. They were already halfway into their flight suits before the echo faded. On the tarmac, ground crews moved with mechanical precision safety pins yanked from missiles. Fuel hoses disconnected, ladders pulled away. Each jet would carry a pair of PL-10 heat-seeking short-range missiles and two PL-15 radar-guided long-range weapons. No anti-ship missiles today, but that wasn't the point. The point was to prove just how close they could get to the Lawrence. Close enough that, if their payload had been different, the ship would already be a smoldering wreck in the waves. Out on the open water, the Lawrence's crew manned their stations. Her Spy 1 radar spun silently, stitching together a perfect, godlike picture of every aircraft, ship, and fishing boat within 250 miles. Somewhere in that vast display, two contacts would soon appear fast, direct, and coming straight for them. By 6:52, both J-16 second were airborne, climbing through 10,000 feet. In each cockpit, the weapons systems officer clicked through an abbreviated checklist. Hydraulics green, navigation aligned, weapons hot. Twin ALWA 31 Farad afterburners pressed the crews into their seats as the fighters arrowed toward the strait. Within seconds, the Type 1475 AESA radar came alive. Its 1,760 transmit-receive modules could steer energy like a scalpel, painting a target while staying almost invisible off-axis. This was not the spray-and-pray beam of a lighthouse, it was a whispering spotlight. American air crews call it the ghost. You often don't know it's staring until the first warning tone bleeds into your headset. Inside the destroyer's Combat Information Center, comms sounded like clip checklists and steady breathing. The Spy 1 array had tracked the pair for more than 200 miles, but the rules of engagement were simple and unforgiving. Weapons free only in self-defense. The Aegis network fused every track into a single, seamless picture: civil airliners, fishing junks, patrol craft, and now two fast movers angling down the threat axis. The strait itself tightened the vise. At its narrowest, barely 130 kilometers across, the Lawrence was threading a legal needle between territorial claims, every mile compressing reaction time. Altitude, range, bearing the geometry was settling into a confrontation both sides could sketch from muscle memory. The Chinese would press close to prove a point. The Americans would log, shadow, and endure. Across the water, the J-16 flight lead eased the nose, building speed while his wingman slid wide to set a bracket. Invisible data pulsed between jets and coastal radars. On the Lawrence, coffee cooled in forgotten cups while watchstanders counted down to the moment when dots would become decisions. Inside the destroyer, the SLQ-32 stopped treating the strait as background static. Two X-band emitters cut through the haze with fighter-grade fingerprints. A watchstander armed the recorders. Every pulse was captured and time-stamped. Calm voices in CIC narrowed to short acknowledgments. The sea was smooth. The spectrum was not. At 7:11, the flight lead made it personal. He rolled inverted at 20,000 feet, put the nose on the plotted ship, then rolled upright and pushed. Altitude became speed. At 500 feet, the air was thick. The AL-31F's drinking hard. One lapse here and you don't divert, you crater. His WMD-7 pod steadied on the superstructure. Through haze, he could read hull numbers, distance, closure, and time to minimum separation flickered on his visor like a countdown. Aegis did quiet math. In a shooting war, SM-2 second would work the outer air, ESSMs, the knife fight, and Phalanx the last wall of tungsten. But the rules of engagement were iron, self-defense only. The system knew which VLS doors to crack and which trajectories would guarantee a kill. The doors stayed shut. The ship logged and held course. The pilot knew those envelopes. 3 miles put him inside comfortable SM-2 geometry and well within ESSM. At 1 mile, even that shrank, leaving only the Gatling storm if someone pressed. He wasn't here to fire, he was here to prove he could have while recording every twitch of the destroyer's defenses. 5 miles east, his wingman slid wide and built a bracket. If fire control locked the leader, the second jet would inherit a clean attack azimuth from the beam. Coastal controllers nudged headings for a rear quarter approach. Better video, safer under American ROE. In Sea Search, the wingman saw William P. at B. Lawrence as a 509-foot rectangle pushing 18 knots, wake bright against gray water. If their pylons held YJ-83 second instead of PL series air-to-air, launch would have come from roughly 20 to 30 miles. The missiles would drop to wave skim and pop only in the terminal blink. From that profile, the crew would have seconds, not minutes, once seekers broke the horizon. Today, that math stayed academic. That was the point. The runs began measured, repeatable, designed to stop a breath short of an incident. From a stern, then a beam, the jets held 300 to 500 feet, cameras steady, throttles breathing. On the bridge, mugs rattled. Below, watchstanders logged every sweep, every mode change, every shift in PRF. The dots were now metal and thunder, close enough to shake rails, close enough that a single wrong word on any net could turn a demonstration into a disaster. At 5 miles, the ship's close-in weapon system quietly took notice. Phalanx radar acquired the inbound fighters, tracked them cleanly, and then waited guns cold. Safety doctrine firm. On the scopes, the J-16 second flickered from search to track while scan, a focused brush of energy every 2 seconds. Out on the jets, KG-800 jamming pods warmed, ready to flood the bands, but the run stayed dry. This was about proximity, not blinding. The lead pilot steadied at 3 miles astern, wake centered in his HUD. He inched the throttles forward, afterburners lit with twin orange cones. At a mile, he could make out sailors on the flight deck. At half a mile, William P. Lawrence filled the glass. At 1,000 feet, he roared overhead altitude 300 feet, offset slightly to starboard for the camera. The jet wash slapped the superstructure. Rails rattled. Bodies leaned into the artificial gale. On the bridge, the anemometer spiked 95 knots, then back to normal. In CIC, the moment was logged with professional flatness. 7 hours, 11 minutes, and 34 seconds, J-16, altitude 300 foot, lateral separation 50 foot. Aegis had already computed 17 clean ways to kill him. SM-2, ESSM, even the last-ditch wall of tungsten. The rules of engagement chained every option. Self-defense only. The lesson was recorded on both sides. A pattern took shape by 7:23. The fighters alternated runs every 2 minutes, one from astern, one from the beam. They held between 300 and 400 feet low enough to make headlines, high enough to cite safety compliance if anyone asked. Each pass arrived on rails, stable, repeatable, designed to look effortless and feel inevitable. Then came the capabilities display. The lead slowed to 150 knots. Gear up, flaps cracked, sliding into a half-mile parallel on the destroyer's port side. His WMD-7 pod locked on the bridge windows and stayed welded there. The helmet-mounted sight cued PL-10 second wherever he looked. The point wasn't the missile, it was the message. My sensors can hold you the entire time. On the American side, watchstanders captured every frame, every tone, every mode switch. The wingman chose theater. He lined up high, then pushed for a supersonic crossing at 1,000 feet, a clean boom that rippled the sea and thumped through steel. Windows quivered. Coffee jumped in mugs. On deck, heads ducked on instinct and then lifted, work resuming as if on a metronome. And still, no one fired. The destroyer's systems tracked, predicted, and held. The J-16 second pressed, paraded, and broke away, only to return on fresh headings. It was pressure applied with a micrometer, close enough to set teeth on edge, measured enough to stop short of trigger pulls. The strait had become a stage, and both sides were playing to the cameras while pretending they weren't. By 7:38, the picture hardened. SPY-1 resolved a heavy return dead ahead, a Type 052D destroyer sliding across the Lawrence's track. Its Type 346 Ampere AESA painted the ship in narrow beams. In her VLS, YJ-18 Second sat silent yet eloquent subsonic cruise. Terminal sprint. Range fell to 8 miles as the original J-16 pair yielded to 2 fresh fighters lifting from the mainland. In CIC, Aegis fused tracks, drew soft red engagement arcs, and kept every weapon cold. The helm held 18 knots. The navigator threaded a corridor legal by meters. The newcomers pressed lower and faster. The lead leveled at 200 feet and 500 knots, the destroyer filling his HUD like a runway. At minimum separation, he skimmed 300 feet overhead, offset 100 starboard for the camera. The wingman chose spectacle, executing a crossing run 150 feet high, 500 ahead of the bow. Sea to sky, the vice set. Fighters roamed above, a surface combatant loomed ahead, and if experience counted, submarines waited below the layer. Ground control braided vectors with the O-52D's approach, squeezing options without tripping a tripwire. The CO's guidance stayed the same. Transit peacefully, document everything, do not escalate. Every discipline mile tightened the spring. By 7:52, 2 attack lines were forming, one dead ahead, one from astern. The O-52D pushed to 30 knots as the fighters restacked for alternating passes at 300 to 400 feet. Sensors hummed. Phalanx tracked. ESSM solutions blinked and waited. Proximity did the talking. Access, not warheads. Restraint, not gun gas. The strait felt smaller with each pass, as if someone were bleeding oxygen from the room. And still the destroyer held course. Cameras rolling, logs filling, crew steady on checklists. The message captured on both sides was simple and undeniable. We can do this again closer, faster, whenever we choose. At 7:52, the trap closed. One J-16 drove in from dead ahead at 300 feet, while another pressed from astern at the same altitude. Far ahead, a Type 052D surged to 30 knots and held a crossing line. On the Lawrence's scopes, vectors crossed like drawn blades. No one blinked. Radios spoke in clipped syllables. The lead jet dropped to roughly 120 feet and slid a beam to port, inside 200 feet. At the same instant, his wingman ripped past the starboard beam at 400, afterburners pouring orange into gray air. The destroyer sat in a deliberate scissors of noise and proximity. Phalanx reacted first. The mount snapped from search to track, and the barrel spun to pre-fire RPM with a wasp nest whine. Across Aegis consoles, ESSM solutions flashed ready. The TAO's thumb hovered over the inhibit. One press would unchain a wall of tungsten. For a handful of stretched seconds, the picture saturated. KG-800 second were hot. The J-16 second radars ticked in focused bursts. SPY-1 painted perfect cones and held them. Range, altitude, and closure tumbled toward zero. Breaths stopped and stayed stopped. The captain's order did not change. Hold. Record. The ship obeyed its own restraint, even as the easy answer begged to be taken. Abruptly, both fighters pitched into steep climbs, afterburners flaring as they clawed for altitude and bled from view. Track lost out of envelope. A watchstander called, relief stitched through the syllables. Phalanx spun down from angry purr to a ticking coast. Ahead, the O-52D eased her nose and slid to parallel, shadow instead of blade, pressure, not collision. Radio discipline held, no taunts, no warnings, only sterile calls and clean logs. Fuel math caught up with the jets. Arcs bent north and kept going, contrails thinning into haze. The destroyer steadied again at 18 knots, wake straight as a yardstick. In CIC, someone finally exhaled. Data, video, ELINT, and radar tracks stacked into neat folders. A petty officer restarted a checklist, voice steady but a notch lower. On the bridge, the horizon returned to its usual size. Coffee returned to cups. The lesson was unspoken and obvious. Proximity is a weapon. Restraint is too. The Chinese showcased access without lighting a fuse. The Americans answered with control without surrendering space. Both sides recorded everything. By 8 o'clock, the strait looked ordinary again. Whitecaps, freighters, traffic lanes. Ordinary was a useful lie. The Lawrence held her southerly track, antennas listening, cameras rolling, the crew back on rhythm. Steel on water, light on waves, and the quiet knowledge of how narrowly the morning had walked the edge.